Hi friends, and welcome to the program. Hey, we're headed to Northwest Ontario today for a deer hunt. We're going up to visit our friends Cheryl and Gary Gauthier at Harris Hill Resort. And by we, I mean my bride, Miss T, my friend Mike Butler, and myself. And we're going up there to do the firearms deer season opener with them. And when we got there, small world, we found a bunch of our neighbors. A bunch of guys from just down the road were going to share camp with us, and together we were all going to go out for opening day and try to set our sights on one of those chocolate antlered 250-pound dandies they have up there. At least that was the plan. Hey, I'm your host, Kyle Randall. This is my Wilderness Journal, and we're headed north to Ontario right now. Just before dark, we rolled into Harris Hill, got all our gear stored in our cabin, then went to join everyone for dinner, only to find out everyone was a bunch of my neighbors, a bunch of guys from right here in Michigan were up hunting. We shared a great meal and some stories, and then tried to get a little sleep before the following morning. Snow. And as the sun came up, even though it was pretty clear outside, I could tell pretty soon it had be snowing. There was no heat at all in the sunrise, and when it did come up, it painted the birch trees a bright red. A sure sign there was a lot of weather on the way. Fortunately, there was also a deer on the way, at least a deer starter kit. Over at the feed station was what appeared to be a button buck, and within a few minutes he was joined by a 3-point. The incoming weather obviously had at least a few deer up and thinking about feeding. I sat there watching as the sun come up, and for a while everything seemed fairly friendly, pretty calm. That is, at least until a little 6-point showed up, and for whatever reason, he wasn't too inclined to share. The 6-point came in and flushed the 3 and the button buck off the feed station before he started to eat. I guess it's true, some just don't work well with others. I never got that box checked when I was in school. We sat there watching, and this was all pretty good entertainment, but these certainly weren't the size of bucks we'd come to Canada looking for. I was hoping to see something a lot bigger with a lot more headgear. But I guess until that kind of buck came along, these were certainly a whole lot better than looking at nothing. And then after about 10 minutes, the 6-point started stiff-legged walking out into the field. There was another buck coming. And this one was a spike. There seemed to be plenty of young bucks, and in fact, for a little while, the two of them stood out there pushing and shoving just like they were a couple of the big boys. Someday in the not-too-distant future, these guys would have enough antler to inflict some real damage, but for now, well, let's just say for now it was an argument about who was going to have to sit at the kids' table. Within the hour, all 3 of the bucks had eaten their fill and were starting to work their way to bed. They stopped for one last jousting match and then slowly headed for the bush. That is, until they all stopped dead still and started looking around, and then they actually split up. Something was obviously coming, and that something was a dandy 8-point. Up the middle of the field came a high, heavy 8-point buck. He appeared to be mature, at least 3 years old. He had to weigh at least 200 pounds, friends. This is a lot closer to what I was thinking when I booked my trip to Canada. He strolled up to and then promptly took possession of the feed station. You can tell just by looking at the difference between these 2 bucks what a mature animal is compared to a juvenile. And I gotta say, I was sitting there kind of caught up in the moment thinking, hey, I am here to shoot one of these, and is this that one? Sometimes you have just a moment But I was faced with something I think is even far more difficult. I had all the time in the world. As long as we didn't spook this buck, it wasn't likely anything else would. I had all the time to sit there and look at him and decide. And I gotta tell you, I knew right from the beginning it was a borderline decision. I could see that he was high, not real wide, pretty heavy, had a bit of a kicker off his left G too. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a little movement. I looked over, and one of the small bucks was walking right at us, and I mean right up to the blind. Not more than 10 or 15 yards. I had to decide, and I had to decide quick, because if we spooked that little buck, he'd more than likely take that 8-point with him, and we wouldn't get to decide. I sat there for just a moment, then ever so carefully eased the rifle back into the blind. I figured if we were real cautious, we might get this little guy to slip by. And yes, I do remember thinking if this blows up on me when she sees this footage, she's going to lump the back of my head. Fortunately, we managed to dodge that little bomb, and after that spike walked off, a doe came working toward the feed station. I sat there watching that 8-point. He was oblivious. He was just filling his face, and as she slowly eased up behind him, I thought, well, hey, dummy, what if he turns around, realizes that this is a doe, and takes off chasing her? You still might not get a shot. It's just one of those things. I was kind of willing to take the risk. Still, I'm not totally crazy. I did get the rifle back up and keep it ready. He's close. Within the next 5 minutes, that doe was joined by a fawn and another smaller buck. Looked like another 6-point. Only this one just walked up and bedded right there in the field. He didn't want any part of that 8-point. And when the 8 finally noticed him and turned and went out there, I thought for sure he'd run him off. Only he didn't. He just kind of walked out there, asserted his dominance, and then there's another little buck came in and bedded down right there. Yeah, turned around and went right back to eating, yeah. I remember thinking about then, this buck must not have got the memo about the rut coming and everything. And he must have heard me thinking it, because it was right then he came out and finally decided, you know, maybe I will go out and check out that doe. He pushed her just a little until she ran up to the feed pile, and then he started walking over toward the bedded buck, and I thought, well, finally he's going to at least run him off. And then he just turned and went back over and started eating again. Some guys are lovers, some guys are fighters, and I guess, yeah, some guys are just eaters. I watched for a few more moments, and then another little buck showed up, and when that 8-point turned to walk out there and challenge him, I knew it was time to make a choice. I'm gonna wait. And Tina, if you're watching, Mike made me. Tina's gonna kill me. This was a good buck. Certainly a great buck in some places, but there are so many good deer up here, and it was just the first morning. I really wanted to give myself a chance to see what else might show up. And I did know that Tina was going to whoop me some, but, you know, I heal fast. But it's the first morning, first couple hours. We'll wait. And you gotta know, as soon as I decided to pass that buck, he turned around and came marching right back across the field as if to say, hey, Buddy, are you sure? You know, I'm a pretty good-looking critter. There's some really big bucks up here. I just hope I don't regret it. I did this once before here, you know. That's the thing about temptation. Yeah, it's tempting. He's getting ready to leave. That 8-point finally decided it was time to go to bed, and I threw the rifle up and looked at him down through the scope one last time. Never gonna get easier than that. And I do recall thinking, boy, I hope I don't live to regret this again. They're leaving. Friends, that decision truly had me worried. Not because I was afraid I wouldn't see any more deer. No, I knew that the Gauthiers had lots of leases and lots of great deer. It's just the fact that I've been doing this long enough to know that any chance you get at a mature deer, especially a mature whitetail, well, you better study on it pretty hard, because every guy and gal I ever talked to that tried to put a deer in the bank, you know, that said, well, I'll wait, maybe I'll shoot him on the last day, and then went home empty-handed, well, they can kind of explain to you what I'm talking about. What I was truly worried about, though, was when Miss T saw the video of that mature 8-point and then saw that I passed it, yeah, I was absolutely sure she was going to slug me. That afternoon, the sun came out and we'd only seen one little button buck, so we were amusing ourselves with some of the other wildlife. It's springtime here in Canada. The butterflies are coming out. Sort of. I think it got a little cold. Here's a present for you, Mike. There's a little buck coming. Just after our entomology lesson, I did notice a little buck followed by a doe working their way up the field toward the feed station. That's that bigger doe from earlier. It was still pretty early for deer to be moving around, but I figured the storm must have them up on their feet and moving again. One antler. One's already busted off. We watched as those 3 deer jostled for feeding position. It was apparent that even with just one antler, this little buck thought he ought to eat first. But they all got a belly full, and within an hour they were headed back to bed. At least we had something to watch during the midday, and a lot of hunts you sit for hours and look at nothing. And speaking of midday, about a half hour later it started to snow again, and as soon as it did, another doe showed up to feed. And not long after she showed up, a little spike started coming up the field. It was snowing a lot harder, but I'll tell you, that's what had those deer moving, I was sure of it. And I also reasoned if it had the little bucks on their feet, well, a big old boy might show up any time. All we had to do was sit and wait. Sooner or later, the deer we were looking for was bound to show up. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It's 1:45 and the deer are already out moving. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the snow had let up and the last of the deer was leaving the field. And I was just telling Mike I thought it might snow again when... Yeah, it looks like it's going to snow again. See his reflection. A dandy buck was walking right by our stand, not 20 yards away, coming up the field from the wrong direction. Where'd that buck come from? I saw his reflection in the plexiglass. Nice 8er. Nice 8-point. I think I had a little bit better than the one from this morning, but a nice 8-point buck. It looked like a pretty good shot. It's a good angle. I'm sitting there just kind of relaxing. It's 3:15 in the afternoon, and I saw his reflection. I kid you not, his reflection in the plexiglass coming from the other way. He's coming from the road. Canada. I tell you what, Gary and Cheryl, they had some stuff. The Gauthiers, this is incredible. We've been here part of one day. Opening day of Canada's firearm deer season. What have we seen? 20 deer?
Yeah.
25 deer? Bunch of bucks. I passed a buck about like this morning. So we're sitting here, and this buck comes walking right in front of us. We didn't dare move. He wasn't 15, 18 yards outside the front of the blind. I didn't even have time to turn the scope down. That was crazy. Wow. Thank you, Gauthiers. Thank you, Harris Hill. Thank you, Mike. Certainly thank you, Lord. That was awesome. Right now, boom, right there. Want to go find deer?
Let's go find deer.
His head is still up. I can't believe it. He's right there. I don't know whether to. I can't see him breathing, but his head is up. I don't know if you can see him, but he's right there. He's right there. He can't be 20 yards in front of us. And I can see his head up. Just come real easy. Ain't moving. Deader than a hammer. He is. He's just like his head is caught in this tree. Mikey, he's done. Was that wild?
That was crazy.
Holy smokes, look at that buck. All caught up in that tree. Held his head up. I could have swore that thing. Let me put this down. Oh. Well, there is a dandy buck, Mr. Mike. Look at that thing. Certainly not the biggest buck in all of Canada, but a good, mature 9-point. And to get it in one day. How many deer did we see today?
Oh, we've seen it was endless all day long.
Gary and Cheryl, the Gauthiers up here at Harris Hill Resort, they have it going on. This is just a beautiful Rainy River buck. There's a bunch of guys in camp from right down the road. Actually, my neighbors, a bunch of guys from Newaygo, your neighbors. Folks from down with Stanwood and Lakeview. Hopefully them guys are doing as good as we are. This, however, is the best buck in all of Canada. You know why? Because it's mine. Do you think Miss T will like that? Look at that thing. Thank you, Gauthiers, Harris Hill Resort. Thank you, Mikey, and certainly thank you, God. What a wonderful thing the white-tailed deer is. That was incredible. To see his reflection in the window glass coming from the other way, that was just awesome. What a cool thing. That's a big old good one right there. And just that quick, we had our buck. I went out and called Gary. It wasn't even dark yet. Hi there. What? You're in service? Sir, I need some service. Good. I got a dandy buck at 9-point right up here. Okay. Well, all right. We'll get it. Right there. What do you think? That'll do, won't it? Yes, it will. Huh? Yeah. Look at that. That look familiar? seen a picture or two of those on your game cameras?
Yeah, nice job.
Is that all right?
Yeah, great job.
Thank you. Harris Hill Resort. I can highly recommend it. You're going to drag this thing out of here? He weighs a little bit. He's a little bit stout. That's just about as fast and as good as it ever gets, if you're me. What an amazing hunt. That buck come out of nowhere, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, walked right in front of us, and we still managed to get it done without spooking him. And then to add the trauma of finding him like he was, head up, looking like he could jump up at any second, believe me when I tell you, that was a memorable hunt. And when I saw the pictures from some of the other guys deer in camp, well, I'm betting there's a whole bunch of us that won't forget this one anytime soon. So, Mike, what do you think? It might snow? That was indeed an exciting and memorable hunt, and not just for myself, but for all of the guys from Michigan. I spoke to Cheryl later, and she said our group, all of the guys from down here, were 100% successful. Now, that doesn't happen just everywhere, and I truly want to congratulate each and every one of them. And I truly want to thank not only my bride, Miss T, but Mike Butler for the great camera work. And I certainly want to thank Cheryl and Gary Gauthier from Harris Hill Resort. We did have a great trip. And hey, if that's something that interests you, going up there after one of those chocolate horn dandies is something you'd like to try, you get a hold of Cheryl and Gary. Their stuff's at the end of the show like always. Or you know what? You can even come see them at our outdoor show in January. You keep the 17th through the 19th clear on your calendar and come on over to Mount Pleasant to the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort, and they'll be there along with all of the folks that we do business with for you to talk to. Hey, I hope I see some of you up there. I hope you're dragging out a big old chocolate horn beauty of your own, and if I do, well, you know we're going to stop and help you drag it and then share that cup in a fire. And if I don't see you up there, friends, well, I'll look for you right back here, where we'll share another adventure from my wilderness journal. Thanks again, Cheryl and Gary, everybody up at Harris Hill.